everybody, and a warm welcome to Tapas Project Shala. I'm Preeti Vikram, founder of Tapas School. It gives me great pleasure to have with me a fantastic person who has lived, breathed project based learning. And I would love to introduce him to you. And we have with us Mr. Stephen Levy. After 28 years of teaching in classrooms of K-12 schools, Stephen Levy is an educational consultant and a senior fellow at the Center for Advancement of Christian Education, working independently and with EL education schools. He guides teachers throughout the United States and internationally in designing service-based curriculum, engaging instructional practices, student-owned assessments, and character development. He was recognized as the Massachusetts State Teacher of the Year and honored by the Disney American Teacher Awards as the National Outstanding General Elementary Teacher. Mr. Levy was the recipient of the Autodesk National Teacher Award for his impact on project-based learning and has received the John F. Kennedy Prize for the teaching of history. Mr. Levy and his fourth grade students were designated as conservation heroes by the National Park Service for their study of the effects of local bike path on the environment and the community. Mr. Levy has written various articles for educational journals, and his book, Starting from Scratch, details some of the projects and students he has worked with in his elementary classrooms. And so, as you can see, it's a long time that he has spent in working on PBL and making it accessible to everybody who's interested. So a very, very warm welcome, Mr. Levy.
Thank you very much, Preeti. Always excited to meet people who are interested in bringing education alive for students in any way. And project-based learning is, I think, at the core. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all of you who are listening. I'd like to say first, I'm from a very different context than you. I'm an old, white American, and so I pray that some of my experience will be translatable to you. I honor that you have a very different context. I've done some work in India, so I know how different things are there. And then there's also something very deeply similar in what our children are looking for and what we're trying to give them as we kind of invite them into a world where we hope to tap into their desire to make the world a better place.
Absolutely, and that's so wonderfully put. Though we have differences, I think we are connected by our similarities. So thank you for that. There were a lot of questions that we wanted to talk to Mr. Levy about, but we have narrowed down to 5 very critical questions that we want to hear him speak about. And so the first question for you, Mr. Levy, is, let's begin right with the people who are at the core of making PBL accessible, the teachers, the facilitators. What do you think should be the attitude or the aptitude of teachers or facilitators who will embark on the journey of PBL?
Thank you, Preeti. That's such an important foundational question. And I think the very first thing is that teachers, in my experience, tend to be feel like they are middlemen or middle women, middle people in between the curriculum developers and their students. And their job is somehow to transmit what the curriculum developers have created to their kids. So I think probably the first mindset has to be that, no, you are not a middle person. You are, in fact, a designer, and you are modeling for your students what it means to be a creative designer of invitations and tasks that would be engaging for them and teach them what they need to know. So that's first. You're a designer, not a middle person. Second is EL Education, which is the organization I worked for a long time. When it began, it was called Expeditionary Learning Outward Bound. And there was a partnership between Harvard education students and superintendents in Boston and Outward Bound. I don't know if you're familiar with Outward Bound in India. There is Outward Bound in India, but we take kids or adults, anyone, on really challenging outdoor adventures. And so there was a real partnership between what we were trying to do in schools with what Outward Bound instructors were doing with people on their Outward Bound trips. And to me, the sort of metaphor for what the journey that you're going on with your students is number one. And here's what it was on an Outward Bound trip. It's like, what? We're going to climb that mountain. We're going to go across those rapids. We're going to, sea kayak in the ocean. So just the first step being like, this is just impossible. And your feeling is, we can never do that. And then you realize, well, in order to do that, there's a lot we have to learn. There's a lot we have to learn about the terrain, about the equipment, about how to use it, skills, content we have to understand about the weather and patterns, so forth. And so there's a lot of study, a lot of preparation. And there's also an important teamwork part, because the goal that we have is that everybody makes it to the top. It's often not the goal in our schools. The goal is often, just I want to do the best I can. I want to do better than you, so I get a better grade and I get into a better school. It's much more competitive. But on an Outward Bound trip, it's all about like, we are all going to make it. And then you jump in and you begin, and on your way you find there's lots more you need to learn that you didn't realize, and your community and collaboration gets challenged when you start encountering mosquitoes and rain for 3 days and all manner of things. So you have to dig deeper to see what it really means to be a community and work together. So that model of, it looks like it's impossible, there's something that we really have to learn. There's something that we have to do in terms of building a culture, and then jumping in and learning more. And that's kind of a model for how I kind of imagine we're looking at these projects. So with kids, it might be, we're going to write a book. Like, we're just middle school, we can't write a book. That's impossible. And then, well, there's lots we have to learn to do it. And then all manner of reading and writing and content and skills need to be developed in order to be able to do this. And the same idea then with teamwork, because it's got to be, everybody has to make it, and to build that culture where we feel it's really not successful if everyone doesn't make it, is a huge part of a foundation, I think, for any classroom. And then you jump in and you begin to do it, and then you find there's lots more you have to learn, and you do so. So first, you're a designer. Second, you're attempting something that's impossible, and then you're figuring out what we have to learn to be able to do it. And third, as a teacher, when you're doing projects, I like to think of them as over multiple years. Some projects you can only do once because it's just a particular issue that isn't an issue the next year or something. But if you can find a project that you can do over and over, with the idea that the first time I do it is just the first draft. There's lots of things that you're going to just do and not perhaps be able to connect to all your standards, but you're going to be engaged, and you're going to do something that's exciting for kids. And then the next year you're going to do it, and you will have found this wonderful text that you can, here's a way we can connect it to rocks and minerals that I have. Here's how I can get simple machines. And imagine it growing over years. So if you start with something that's small and engaging for kids, and then over time add more and more of the content you need to study. In my class, it was always a project where we planted wheat, and just to see where a loaf of bread came from. And I did this like 10 years. And the first year, it was just a fun project. We just planted wheat and harvested it. And we went through all the steps it took of harvesting and threshing and and winnowing and finally baking. And and we made a book like the first year, and every kid, or pairs of kids, took one step in the journey of making wheat and made one page that we put into a little book that maybe had 12 pages, about where a loaf of bread came from. And then by the 10th year, every kid was writing their own book that was 30 or 40 pages long, that had all that we had learned about rocks and minerals, and about simple machines, about local history, about all the different standards that we had to meet. But it gradually happened over time. We had to learn a lot about math just to figure out a semicircle and its area. Then we plant. And then there's scientific experiments that come as we try different variables to see what's going to make the wheat grow best. And then, it grows, and then we have our harvest, and we do our grinding, and we bake our bread. And there, I would always, this repeated, because each year at the end of the year, because this was winter wheat, you plant it in September and you harvest it in June, which is our school year. And there was nothing we could do with it at the end of the year because kids were all gone for the summer. So I would have my kids from the previous year present the wheat that they grew to the next year's class, and then that class had to figure out how it became a loaf of bread. So third is just over time. You might start small and add to it each year as as you progress. So those are some things those are some things as a teacher that I think are good to keep in mind.
That's great. And I think you've given us really easy ways that the teacher can overcome the thought that, oh my God, this is impossible. Then starting from there to coming, yeah, I can build this, and over years I can get better. So I think that's a great way to put it. And I really love the farming project that became so much more complex than just harvesting wheat. So that brings me to the next question. I'm thinking that maybe not all children are, having the equal skills, or maybe interested in baking bread. There could be so many variables. How do we create an engaged classroom, and how important is that?
Mm-hmm. Mm. It's a great question, and I think a crucial one. I like how Howard Gardner describes it. He calls it the crystallizing experience. As the most important moment in the child's education is the crystallizing experience, when the child connects to something that engages curiosity and stimulates further exploration. So I spend a lot of time working with teachers and myself in thinking about that moment, because if that doesn't happen, if the child doesn't become engaged, then what tools do you have to motivate them to work? I mean, basically, you have B.F. Skinner's toolbox of bribes and threats and rewards in order to motivate your kids. And that comes in subtle ways, in grades, in pizza parties, and stickers, and all manner of things. But I just don't think learning that's built on the foundation of sort of reward and punishment is in the end going to serve our students when they become adults, and try to contribute again to making a better world and think about something more than just themselves. So they have to be engaged, and there's ways of doing that. I think the first one is around the curriculum that we give and the tasks that we invite them to do. And if they are just doing work because they have to do it and get a grade and turn it into the teacher, that might not be very engaging. So the curriculum and tasks, and I want to show you some ideas of just kinds of projects that are engaging in this way to kids. But then not all curriculum is exciting. Not all topics are going to engage all kids. So I think the second thing is just the way in which we deliver the material, deliver the content, and all kinds of instructional practices that involve a use of a variety of protocols, which I'm happy to make available to you sort of afterwards, say through a resource. But teachers I work with, they've got 20 or 30 or 40 different ways in which to engage kids, say in analyzing a text or in having a conversation about something. So a variety of engaging protocols is a second way through our practice that we engage kids. And then I think we also do it through assessment. And the idea of having students become more responsible for their own growth, where they are the ones who are keeping track of where they are in relation to the learning targets, where they're the ones who are setting goals for what they need to improve, where they're the ones who can articulate, like, here's what I can do really well, and here's what I'm proud of, and here's what it is that I'm working on that I'm struggling with. So getting the assessment part more into the student's responsibility than here's something teachers do it to them is a third way I think that they become engaged. And then the whole culture of the room, and all the moves and things that the teacher does to build a culture that has that identity, that we don't succeed unless we all make it. And so how you build that sense of collaboration and the norms that you figure out together of here's how we're going to work together. Here's what it means to be in this classroom. Those are all parts of engaging our students, I think, in the work. I love this. From The Little Prince. So he says, if you want to build a ship, don't herd people together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And I love that because I think in the end, one of the things that we're most educating isn't so much in their heads, it's in their gut, it's in what they desire, it's in their vision of what a good life is. And if we're not educated, if they don't have the desire to do it, then again we're back to B.F. Skinner, and we have to motivate them with rewards and punishments. I think too much of our education is about, okay, here's how you use the hammer, here's how you bend the wood, here's how you glue it together. All good, and kids make a boat and they're proud, they're happy, but they have no, they don't long to go to the sea. But don't you think if like your longing to go to the sea was great enough that you would figure out how to make a boat? Um, that's that's if I was going to translate it to education, I'd say this: if you want to engage students in learning, don't herd them together to memorize facts, and don't assign them trivial tasks and throwaway assignments, but rather give them real work to meet the real needs of real people. So that's what I'm about with in terms of projects, and I think that difference is a huge one. If you think about the work that kids do, like where does, I don't know, in my country, 99% of the work that kids do, if you think about where does it end up? And I have to say, it ends up in the trash can. Maybe you have it up on the refrigerator for a while, but it ends up being thrown, and that just is a poor statement for like, why do I want to do work that's just going to go in the trash? So what kind of work can we do that's going to make a difference, that I'm proud of, that has some lasting value? Two things. I wanted to show you another example of something, but so we'll get to this more later, I think, because the question often is how do we meet our standards? How do we teach the kids what they have to learn? And so that one of the big principles is that the content and skills and character is formed in the context of meaningful work that serves genuine needs. There isn't any separation between, oh, here's a service project, oh, and now we go and learn. There's no separation between what we're learning academically and our spiritual, our social, our psychological health is not also being developed. And this one I want to highlight for you, that students are expected to share their work with an audience of significance. And maybe if you only take one thing away from all that we talk about, um, that may be the most important. And again, it relates to this idea that if I'm just doing the work to turn into the teacher, um, then I'm not motivated other than just that for myself. I want to get a good grade. I want to get into a good college. I want to get a good job. I want to lead a good life. But it's so centered on just myself. So giving kids work to do that matters to somebody beyond the teacher. Here's an example. So this is a sixth grade teacher. It's her first year teaching, and she's a Spanish teacher. And she's in an expeditionary learning school, so she's all excited. She's designed all these great projects that she thinks are going to really be engaging for her kids. It's a very urban school in Boston. And I get to see her about 2 weeks into the year, and I see her coming away from the copy machine with a stack of papers from the Spanish workbook. And very different from what I knew she had planned. I said, Lauren, how's it going? And she was just devastated. She said, everything I thought was going to be engaging and for my kids, they just rolled their eyes. It was terrible. And I don't even think I can teach like this. So I thought at least if I'm copying pages and we're doing the workbook that they're learning some Spanish. Now I had just come back from actually it wasn't me, sorry, it was my wife and my son came back from a trip to Guatemala where they had been helping a small Ixil Indian village in the mountains of Guatemala after the terrible civil war where all of the men were killed either by government forces or revolutionary forces, and it was only women and children left in this village, and they were helping them to build houses. They were there for a few weeks, and one of the things they found there was a school, and really wasn't much of a school; it was just a roof. And but the ticket for any of these kids, if they chose to want to have a life outside of their village, was to learn Spanish. And the teacher had no resources to teach Spanish. And I said, Lauren, like, do you think you could teach your kids enough in the first year of their Spanish to write like little first readers to send to these kids in Guatemala to help them learn Spanish? And it was a remarkable change. We went in and talked to the kids about these kids. The kids were excited. They thought, "Oh, now I'm going to be able to do something that makes a difference." But then Lauren got all upset for a moment and said, "But I don't have time to do this because I have all the standards that I have to cover, and I just can't do it." I said, "Well, Lauren, if you write a little story, don't stories have to have a setting?" Yeah, and so you have to learn about what to say. You have to learn about mountains and forests and cities and wherever the setting is. And isn't that the vocabulary you have to teach? He says, oh yeah, that's true. And don't stories have characters? Yeah, and so I have to learn like the parts of the body or describe the colors or just to even describe the character. Don't you have to? And isn't that what you're supposed to be? Yeah, that is. And there has to be action in a story, right? Things have to happen. So there's a whole bunch of verbs we have to learn. And in Spanish, the way they construct a sentence is a little bit different than how we do in English. So we have to learn about that. And this was the dawning moment that has to happen in a project that lasts, is one where you realize I'm not sacrificing my standard. This isn't something I'm doing in addition to all the things I have to teach, but this is the way and the means, this project, through which I'm going to get my kids engaged in learning the content and skills that they need. And so they go on, and every kid now is going to make a book. Some will make little stories, some just an ABC book of Spanish words, but they'll all be super appropriate for the audience that they're making these books for, again, which is to help sort of serve in this world and make a better world. I have what I call the hierarchy of audience. And you can see the motivation increases as we move up this triangle. At the lowest level, it's just, I have to do it to turn it into the teacher. If there's going to be a little presentation, like maybe even it's just to a class next door, or it's to our parents that we're going to invite in, the stakes go up a little bit, and I'm a little bit more motivated to make the work of quality. Maybe we're going to even present to the whole school community. And we're going to invite all the classes, and then the stakes are even high. Maybe we're going to present it to an audience that's even beyond the school. We're going to invite the town. We're going to invite the people of our town in. We're going to invite the mayor. Um, or to people capable of critiquing is when you've worked with experts like an architect, or you've worked with a historian or an archaeologist as an expert. Those people come in, and those are the people that are going to evaluate the work that the kids did. And if kids think, gee, that my teacher's not evaluating, this is that architect that we work, he's going to be the one coming in. That scientist is going to be the one coming in to look at my work. Then I really want to make sure that I do a good job. And at the highest level is that this is going to change somebody's life, my work. My work really matters. So I like to think of this, and it's not like every project is going to be at the top of the triangle to be of service, but I want to always be thinking about how can I move it up sort of to the next level. And the higher I get, I know the more motivation and engagement I'm going to have for my kids. I want to show you some examples of projects that are sort of engaging in this way. These are kids from a high school in a very small town in Iowa in the United States who were all thrown out of school. In fact, they went to an alternative school where just only kids with difficulties that had been expelled from their schools went. And they discovered that they were studying about World War II, and they discovered that one of the Tuskegee Airmen, who were African American fighter pilots in World War II, where here no one thought that African Americans could ever fly planes. And these became a powerful and very respected group of fighters called the Tuskegee Airmen. And one of them had gone to the high school in Dubuque. So they researched, they found, they actually wrote to them. They staged a reunion of the Tuskegee Airmen in Dubuque, Iowa. They raised money to restore a plane that was rotting away, rusting away on a runway that was identical to the plane that they flew in the war. And then they wrote this whole book on finding other people in their town who had been in World War II and writing their stories. These kids in Chicago lived in a community where there was, I think, 96% of the kids in this school had witnessed gun violence, had known someone who had been affected by gun violence. And so they decided, we're going to take that on as a problem. How can we help our city to reduce the gun violence here? And they ended up sort of finding who are the people in our city who are working for peace. And they just went and they interviewed all of them. Pastors, they interviewed rabbi, they interviewed police people, and made this beautiful book of and every kid, pairs of kids, worked together to interview and then write the story of these people and how they were bringing peace. These kids in a science project had a pool. Vernal Pool is one that just comes in the spring and then it dries up during the summer, and lots of life is generated around this vernal pool. And these kids wanted to get this land designated as a vernal pool so that nobody could build there and it would be protected. So there was a whole political aspect of this. You had to write proposals and prove that this was a right vernal pool. And each kid took a different animal or plant that was in that vernal pool. They had to do in art class a watercolor drawing. They had to do a physical description and describe the habitat. They were also studying fables in literature, and so they had to write a fable about some aspect of the creature that they were writing about. They had to so this beautiful book then of all of the animals and plants that are part of the vernal pool. Another great interviewing project was just immigrants who had moved into this community. And every student or pairs of students, again, interviewed one of the people who had moved into their community, an immigrant from different places, and put together that beautiful calendar. Oh, here's one of my favorite. This is a kindergarten. They go, I went to the principal and said, and we invited her to come in and tell the kids in kindergarten, you know, I work very hard, and we have lots of visitors come to our school. And when they come to our school, they come to my office to find out, like, how do I go to find where Mr. Croce is? And I have to get up from my work, and I don't mind because I like that we have visitors, and I have to take them to where this teacher might be that they want to find. Could you make like a map of the school and all the people that are in our school, and we'll put it right in the front entrance so when people come in to visit, they can look at your map and see where to go to be able to find the teacher that they want to see. So the kids go and interview all the people in their building. And I love the question of the interview, which is a tool. Like, what tool do you use in your work here in this building? And so, so they all make a page in this book. They find in the school map like where he's located. So when you walk into this school, the whole front hall is filled with these little interviews and these maps. So you would know where to go to find anybody in their school. Are these kids, sixth graders in Wisconsin, write a book? Like, I can't write, but they were writing a book about Wisconsin for kids by kids, because they know in fourth grade, these are sixth graders, but in fourth grade, they have to study Wisconsin, local history and geography. So every kid is going to take a different person who was famous in Wisconsin, and then write, just about them. And there'll be a chapter all on the people of Wisconsin. And then another section was all about the different places, famous places in Wisconsin. And you can see the work is beautiful. And that's because that's a whole nother part of this is how do you support kids to do quality work? And maybe we'll have to talk about that at another conference, but that's another whole feature of this. But the multiple drafts, the way we give them feedback, the way they give each other feedback, and all becomes part of the quality of these. And then also about its history, both the geological history and social history. And then this becomes this beautiful book that gets sold all over the state, because fourth graders want their schools, elementary schools want it because it's such a great resource to learn about their state. There's not a lot around in math, but I like this one, which isn't just math, but these are eighth graders who think, imagine themselves in 20 years, and they try to project like who they're going to be, what kind of job do they want to have. And they write about themselves. They have to interview themselves as they would be if they met themselves 20 years later, and ask them about, like, how did you get into this position? And then they answer. So they interview themselves. But the math part is lovely because they pick their job, but then they have to figure out what's their budget going to be. How much are they going to get paid in that job? What are their costs that they're going to have? And so they work out their monthly budget, and then it gets more complicated as they figure out their percentages and then their taxes. They have to figure out what their taxes would be, and then it gets to pretty much higher math when they have to figure out their retirement calculations. Anyway, they're learning a lot of math, right? But it's connected to their imagination, even of their own future. Here's a project. If any of you are kindergarten teachers or early teachers, I don't know how it is in your schools, but our teachers just love to buy stuff from the teacher store or from and put this stuff up on the walls, which I'm not a fan of. I just don't think that your room should be like decorated to look cute. I think your room should reflect who it is that this group of people are. And the more that you can create what goes on your walls, I think the more exciting it will be for kids, and the more representative it will be of who you are. I could go into any school in the country and see this. I wouldn't even know where I was. It's so generic. So here's a project for you who have a nice, say, an alphabet chart. So what you can do is inspire kids about, yeah, I had to buy these things at the store, but we can make our own alphabet chart. And so every kid's going to get a different letter. And we're going to go through a process with them of multiple drafts of drawing the letter, because we really want it to be beautiful. And we want it to rest right on the line, and we want it to be symmetrical, and we want it to be, so we're going to, and we're going to add like a sentence to it, because that's how writing begins, with a subject and an action. So every kid gets a letter, and then we have this beautiful ceremony. And when all the letters are up, we invite the parents in, and one by one, the kids come and take the letter that they made, and they put it over the letter that they bought at the store, and everybody just cheers. So the sort of pride of, and then do that same thing with your number chart, and do it with your shape chart, and take I call it GROCM, the gradual reduction of commercial materials, where you sort of use those as opportunities for to learn about colors, but let's make our own, and let's see how do you make a circle? That's just so hard, and we have to do it many times to get it just right. And then ABC books are great projects to begin with, and these students are studying earthworms, so they're going to make a guide to what they've learned about the earthworms, and sometimes it's just too cute. I mean, you just have to look at that, and those are other kids. But A is for the animal kingdom, and F is for 5 hearts, because a human has 1, but earthworms have 5. All right. I think this is the last one, but there's this book on these kids were in Washington D.C. and one of their sort of virtues was be kind, hard work, be kind, something else. And Henry said one day to his teacher, Mrs. Morenoff, I don't feel very kind when I come to school, because I walk by all these people who are just laying down on the sidewalk, and I don't say hello, and I just turn my head, and I just have to walk by them, and it doesn't feel good. And so this class took on a study of homelessness, and they met with all kinds of people who served the homeless. We met with some people who were homeless, and they wanted to create a book to teach people that homelessness, I mean, they're not just all bad drug addicts. I mean, there's lots of reasons, and they wanted to teach people about what it means to be homeless. And they did this both in English and in Spanish. So again, every kid gets a different letter and something for each letter that represents. And all right. So those are some ideas of engagement. Sorry, that was a long answer to the question, but I hope, just for me, seeing models and getting images of the kind of work kids can do can really expand my imagination. So I hope it gave you some ideas as well.
That was absolutely mind-blowing. I think each project that you put up and each image that you were showing, it connected so deeply with me, whether it is the Spanish project or the alphabet chart. Every one of it, I think, struck a chord, and it was really great to see them, not just as theory, but something that has been practiced. So it's really easy for our viewers also to know that this wasn't done in random theory form. It was actually practiced, and this is possible. And I think it makes it that much more tangible for any parent or educator watching this, that it's real and it's contextual, and I would have loved to learn like this. And I'm sure our viewers also agree with me that why were we not taught like this, you know? So thank you so much for presenting all of that to us, and introducing us to what PBL can look like. I think you did touch upon assessments a little bit right at the beginning of how to engage a classroom. So I think we should talk a little bit more about how assessment and looks like in an inquiry-based classroom, and how do we kind of match the standards that we are unfortunately having to meet. You know, so
right. That's such a challenge, such a stumbling block. So many projects kind of just never take off because of that pressure to cover all of the standards. So let me talk a little bit about like as you, because part of that comes in as you design your project. You're very aware of what your standards are, and what you're thinking of in the project is how can I find engaging ways of getting to those skills and content that the standards demand. So just about when you start, like if you're starting to plan this project, it's very overwhelming. And I think of this little chart. And the point is, there's lots of places you can start. Some people start with, I just have this great idea for a product. I really want to make a public service announcement. I just think that's such a cool, I really want to make an ebook, or I really want to build something. All the balls are getting lost in our playing. I really want to build like a shed so it may start with an idea for a product that's needed somewhere. Or it may start with field work. There's an opportunity to go visit some site where they discovered, if you have places in your area that are just interesting to explore historically, or museums, or maybe we're going to start with, I went to this amazing museum, saw this incredible, maybe that's where I'll start. Or it may be that there's an opportunity for service, that there's a real need in your community, and you want to start there. Or maybe it's just something you're excited about and you know a lot about and you're passionate about, because whatever it is you teach them, it's going to be your passion that communicates to the kids that this matters. But maybe it's just something like you're just a fabulous knitter and weaver, and so I'm going to start with just something I know really well. Or maybe there's a local issue that's controversial. And you want to, maybe with older kids, you want to kind of get engaged in this issue, and that may lead to, and of course, the standards. A lot of people, I have to start with the standards. You may start there. The point with this is as I plan, or I think, I'm thinking about all these things, and it doesn't matter where I start as much as that in the end they all meet. So if I start with this local issue, I have to have in the back of my mind these standards and see how can I get from studying the different perspectives on this issue to the things that I have to teach. Or if I start with this field work, how am I going to get, what product am I going to make that's going to be of meaning and of use beyond just turning into the teacher? So wherever you start, I think it just is about bringing all of those pieces together. So I like to think about the end. I live in Lexington, Massachusetts. There's the center of my town. We have to study local history. And in my town, we're reading this book about Lexington, and it says nobody knows where the name Lexington came from. And this was shocking to me because it's such a historical town. It's where the American Revolution began. The first shots of the Revolutionary War happened right there where you're looking. So, but we don't know where our name came from. And I had a kid who said, Mr. Levy, I have an aunt who lives in Lexington, Kentucky, a different Lexington. Maybe she knows. And it turned out there are 24 other Lexingtons in the United States, in different states. And I have 24 kids, so that's one of the signs. Okay, I guess I have to do this. So each kid's going to take a different Lexington and find out how it got its name. They write letters to the mayors of these towns. They get back amazing letters, and some sent photographs, some sent, but it was fantastic. And the question became, I always have this question: how are you going to share what you've learned with others? Because you have a responsibility when you learn something to share it. Because if they become a scientist and they discover something as an adult, the first thing they have to do is publish it and share it. Or if you're a teacher and you get a great idea for how something works, like there's this, I want to share it with my colleagues. So I want to build that ethic of when I learn something, I want to share it. So we do it all the time, and it's often helpful in what leads us to our product. In this case, they said they want to have a museum. Let's have a museum of all the different Lexingtons. Um, so now here's where I want to take you. I've got them excited, right? They're engaged. They want to make this museum. Now I have to think, what is this content and skills that I need to address? Well, we really need to work on expository writing and conventions in reading. We really need to work on inference and main idea. Math, I have measurements units and units of scale coming up, and I've got a social studies. Got to get to the regions of the United States and our westward. Geography, their skills, character. These kids they just weren't persevering. They were like, first time, okay, I'm done. And doing something, they just didn't have it, and courage to stand up and present. I wanted those to be, and just attention to detail with their craftsmanship so all of those things, and they're not, of course, all my standards, but they're ones that I'm thinking about. I'd like to address with this project. So now I have to go from there and think, okay, well, let me just say, so this is all in my mind. We go to the museum. There's a museum 20 minutes from a walk from our school. So we walk to this museum. I had arranged to meet we didn't want to see the stuff in the museum. We wanted to go down in the basement and meet with the designers who design exhibits, because that's what we're going to be doing. And we want to hear from them, like, so what do you think about when you design? How do you do that well? And they would tell us cool stuff like, well, we know the average height of the people who come into our museum of their eyes is 54 inches. And so we think about that when we decide where we're going to display something. And we do experiments to see how big the font has to be where they can read from a distance, and how much font you can have, because if you have too much, they won't read it. So that all these things, and I'm thinking, oh, terrific. Now we have to go back and measure the average eye height of everybody in our school. Oh, we have to go and do experiments about So we want to, whatever kind of format you're having, if I'm doing a poster, if I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation, if I'm doing an advertisement, whatever it is, I want to make sure I meet with experts in that profession to learn about what quality looks like, because I want to try to replicate those standards as we do our work. So I think about, okay, what am I going to have my kids write about? And of course, they're going to, anyway, so you could help me. We could think together. How are we going to work on inference and main idea? How are we going to incorporate scale and measurement? This reason. So that's how I begin to design. Now, each kid's going to get a piece of foam core, 3 feet by 4 feet, and a little table for artifacts. And now I have to decide what's going to go on that 3 by 4 piece of foam core. And that's where I'm thinking about all these things. And I want to give assignments that are going to end up as part of what goes on that board. Here's my country. Here's all the different Lexingtons. It wouldn't mean so much to you, but each one of them tells a different story of westward expansion and how they're connected to. Here's where our Lexington is, way over on the East Coast. And you can see them all across the country, but each one told a different story, which was wonderful. We wrote a second letter to all the mayors when we knew we were going to have a museum, and said, can you send us artifacts? And so they all sent like amazing artifacts. So from Illinois, we got all the hat of the farmer, and the tassels of their high school hat, and the horseshoes that they make there, and beer nuts. Yeah. But each kid had to write, well, the big writing was they had to write a narrative of how their town got its name. And so all of my writing skills around writing narrative, I'm going to be teaching. But in the end, it's not going to be, okay, write a story to turn into me that I'll give you a grade and then it throws away. But it's going to be, your narrative is going to end up being as part of this museum exhibit. So they're learning all that they have to learn. They had to take every artifact they got, they had to write a page description and summary of it. And then they had to turn that into 3 sentences. And all the debates just around, like, what are the most important things that we want to say, just really helped us focus in on this idea of determining importance. They had to do everyone had to do a map. You can see in Texas, and the map had to be to scale, and it had to show all the different regions, and had to be a legend and a key. So again, all of my map making skills, we would do the same. I'd go through my unit on maps, and then the product was going to be, again, this thing that mattered, not just something that would get thrown away. All right, so we learned a lot about that, all the different Lexingtons. Turned out ours was the first, so that was too bad. But they were all named after us. And then here's the exhibit, and it was up in the museum for 2 weeks. And our town hall day, or I'm sorry, our town day, where, just a celebration in our town, we set it up in town, and kids would talk about it. So so I wanted to show that, because when you're doing a project, think you got to know your standards really well, and then you have to plan well, but also be kind of loose to see where kids are going to go with it. And but if I know my standards well, then I'm able to discern when things come up. Is this going to lead me to my standard or not? And if it isn't, then I'm going to try to encourage them to go explore on their own. If it is, I might bring the whole class along in that direction. A little bit more about assessment. So we, for a long time, it was just, you assessed every project differently, because we didn't have any criteria for like what a beautiful project or high quality work meant, because it was just so different in a kindergarten drawing of a cat and in an 11th grade science experiment. So how could we couldn't think, they just were too unique. But after many years of trying, finally came up with a measure that I think is pretty powerful. And we're looking for these 3 things in our project, and we assess them according to these. So one is their complexity. Does this project require kids to think in some, analyze, solve problems? Is there something where it's connected to a bigger idea than just this little topic? Is there something really challenging that they had to read and write? Or do they see something from multiple? Is there evidence of complexity is the first thing. And there's a lot of sub-bullets under these, but these are the main categories. Second element is craftsmanship. And is it done beautifully? Is there attention to detail? Is it planned well? Is it laid out well? And then the third is authenticity. And is there something that I can see in this project that's the original thinking of this student? Like the difference would be if I gave kindergartners an outline of a cat and said, color it in. It would look pretty. They could do that. But if I just said, draw a cat, and not give them the outline, it wouldn't be nearly as accurate, but it would be much more interesting and beautiful and reflective of the authentic voice and hand of that child. So we want to look for evidence of originality, not just, oh, I did this research, I got this off the internet, and I made this report and put it together on a poster. The second is then real world formats. So we want to try to use formats, not just turning into, so instead of everybody write a book report, we're going to start a literature journal. And all the books we read, we're going to create like a book review magazine that we can give to other classes of the books that we like and why we think they're good. And so they're going to do the same work, but it's just not turning it into the teacher and throwing away. It's like we're making this magazine to give other kids with our advice about these books. And about, again, we've talked a lot about this idea of the work that matters. So at the end of a period in our schools, we have a rubric which has all of these, and we'll go around and the teachers will have all the kids work out, and we'll just go around and we'll look for evidence. Do we see this? And maybe we find one year, gee, these projects are really beautiful. The craftsmanship is amazing. And frankly, that's because the teacher probably did a lot of it, because it's hard to really teach kids to do it. But there isn't any evidence of kids having to have thought about anything. There's no evidence that they had to solve any real problems. So next year, when we design our projects, we want to be thinking about how do we build more complexity into the thinking we're asking kids to do. All right, the other important part of assessment is using assessment to help them learn rather than just to reward or punish them for work that they've done. So there's a whole field of assessment for learning and helping teachers to, that's again maybe another conference. But let me just say that the most important assessment isn't what you do to them. The most important assessment is what's going on in the kids' heads. Am I doing my best work? Is this really something that I'm proud of? Have I really shown my mastery of the learning target in this? If that's not going on in the kid's head, then it's just something you're doing to them. So this idea, again, I spoke of very much earlier of kids owning the sort of assessing of their work in relation to a standard, seeing what they need to do to get better. All right, let me just show you. Well, so the product, the final product is really, and the exhibition is when they share it. You can just see that's just the tip of the iceberg. And all of the work that they've done in their content areas, building knowledge and skills is sort of below the surface. You don't see that all in the final product, but that's what they've been working on. Sometimes the product is like this. This is a video. These kids were studying snakes. They had a pet snake in their room. And everybody's totally afraid of snakes. And maybe in your country there are a lot of more poisonous snakes, but here, like, yeah, there are some bad snakes, but most of them aren't harmful. But everybody has an irrational fear of them, and these kids said that's not right. The snakes they're good part, they serve important functions, and we shouldn't just hate all snakes. And so one of the products they made was this video, which they would go around to different places and show to try to teach kids not that they don't have to be afraid of snakes. So I'm just going to show you a short part of it. There were multiple verses, and in each verse they shared something different about what they learned about the snake. But I think you'll enjoy this.
It doesn't matter if you're scared of them or not. Just open up your heart, because snakes were just born this way. Our teachers told us to get ready, be herpetologists. If you don't know, that means we study snakes from everywhere around the world. There's nothing wrong with having scaly skin. We say snakes are all made perfectly. So watch them slip, cause they'll go far, even with no legs and arms. No need to be scared of snakes, they're not all the same. You can't change who they are. Snakes are born this way, they are a part of this world. Don't judge snakes by their looks, you can't change who they are. Snakes are born this way. Did you know that without snakes, mice would eat up all our grains? There would be no food for cows. Without cows, no pizza and no ice cream. We need snakes, maybe they are born this way. You can't change who they are. Snakes are born this way. That was great. That was actually really high pitch now. That was really good.
So that was fun. There's a lot more verses, but they had the problem of, remember, their mission, their purpose was to convince people not to be afraid of snakes. So I asked them, like, how are you going to know if you've made any difference? And they thought, I don't know. So we had to somehow find a way of assessing whether or not they had any impact with their presentations. So Oh, before that, just so even assessing the quality of their production. Now this is going to be, again, crucial for all assessing in project-based learning. It's the idea of the rubric. And you somehow have to together decide, here's what excellence, here's what high quality, here's what beauty looks like. And you have to name, here's the things that matter. So in this snake song, what mattered was their posture, their voice, their expression, their eye contact, and their movement. That's what teachers have to do with what matters in this writing is your voice, is your organization, are the ideas that you use, are the word choice. Whatever project it is, you have, and whatever it is that you're assessing, you have to define the criteria of what success looks like. And it's great if you can get input from students by looking at other models. So if I want to teach something about how to write, say, a beautiful lab report, I want to look at a bunch of lab reports and I want to have kids say what they like about them and what they don't like or could make better. And they be the ones that sort of name, here's the criteria for what makes a powerful scientific report. And I may add things to that if they don't say them, but they'll usually say most of the things that I would have just explained to them previously. So engaging them but anyway, so back to how are you going to know if you've made any difference, which was a really challenge. And so they decided, well, okay, we need to somehow find a way to measure fear. And at first you think, well, you can't measure fear. But that's what the rubric was. And so the kids all then designed like criteria. So like, what would you call a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4? So every kid designed them and then they voted on them and ended up choosing these. So here was their rubric. If you got a 1, that means I love snakes so much that if a snake crawled in my bed, I would kiss it. Or number 2, I would let a snake crawl on me, but not for long. Or 3, I'm scared of snakes, but I won't faint if I see one. And then 4, every time I see a snake, I panic. I hate snakes so much, I would move to Jupiter. I would rather eat a dragon than look at a snake. So now they could go in and have kids fill this out before they did their presentation. And then they could fill it out again after they did their presentation, and kids would be able to see, oh, we made it. Look at 8 kids, had an impact, and they marked themselves, a difference. So, but this idea of the rubric of creating with kids, if you can, sort of the descriptors of what we're looking for. In preschool, it looks like this. Just getting into circle. Or like this, cleaning up your table. And you could imagine after we've all done cleanup, we could look at these pictures and ask kids, so how did we do? How did your table do today? And then the kid, we got a 3, ours was totally clean. And again, it's engaging them in this reflection on what they've done in a way that is valuable. Okay. Did you have a question, Preeti, about how do we share the work? Tell me what that one was.
Yeah, so I think this is all fantastic things that you showed us, and especially enjoyed the snake video. I'm probably a little less afraid of snakes now, so that's feedback for students.
That's good.
They did a great job. So I think the part that we now need to really think about, we've done, how do we design, how do we practice, how do we assess? The part is, how do we make this learning visible to everybody? How do we ensure that others recognize that we've learned all this?
Yeah. Another great question. So the structures that we build in are complex, and that they're all based on teachers first being very clear about learning targets. and what it is the intended learning that these lessons or these projects are towards. And then it becomes the student's responsibility to produce work that shows they've met those targets, those understandings in science, that empathy in social studies, that skills of writing. And so one way in which they share that on an individual level is and I think one of the most powerful structures that has changed teaching and learning that I've seen is the idea of a student-led conference. So beginning with just so instead of the teacher having parents come in and tell them about it, the kid is the one who runs the conference, even in kindergarten. Where they show you and they have a portfolio of their work that's based on the learning targets that they had been studying. And the kid shows work about, here's what I've done. They read for the parents if that's, here's how I practice my fluency, and kids can articulate where they are in relation to these standards and these targets. And there isn't anything more powerful, I think, than when a parent can hear his kid talk about, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm proud of, here's what I need to work on to get better, because here's where I'm struggling. And they speak about that in the different subjects and about in their character as well. You know, I'm really kind, but I have to learn how to listen better. So first step is just with parents, and that's through the student-led conference. And then most all of these projects in our schools end with a presentation of their learning. Sometimes it's called a celebration of learning. Sometimes it's called an exhibition. But it is when we now are going to share with the public whatever it was that we learned. Remember that idea of you have a responsibility to share with the public when you've learned something. So I think I could talk about it more, but let me show you a video that might look like. I think this first one is a kindergarten. Their celebration of learning.
But you're from Arkansas. Yeah, and I grew up in Black Bay.
Good morning.
Hello, and thank you so much for coming. In Windsor 7, we've been working on an expedition called Small Acts of Courage. This expedition focused on the civil rights movement in the United States and the local community members whose small acts needed to be captured for all to read.
Today, we just finished our culminating event for our expedition, Small Acts of Courage. This is an expedition that focused on the civil rights movement, and we studied the civil rights movement and major events in the movement, and then students interviewed local citizens who participated in some way or had some connection to the civil rights movement.
Our presentation today is dedicated to our interviewees. We thank you for your time, and we thank you for your stories.
Today, as part of our culminating event, we presented our work to parents, but most importantly, to the interviewees, so that they could see the work that the students completed in their oral history collection, and they could hear the words of the students as they paid tribute to their interviewees.
Ida Marie Gammon Wilson's Small Acts of Courage contributed greatly to the civil rights movement.
In college, she joined students practicing for the Nashville sit-ins. They practiced how they would handle segregation at the lunch counter. They also practiced ways to stay nonviolent.
Ida was a part of the Nashville sit-ins and also helped other students get a diploma by taking their places in their classes and helping them study if they missed opportunities to get information.
Throughout the sit-ins, Ida courageously worked behind the scenes to keep students in school and on the front lines of the integration effort. Ida remains active in civil rights today, as well as gay and women's rights. She is a great inspiration.
I think this expedition works because, first of all, the content is extremely compelling for students.
With boundaries of the Board of Education.
Their experience with the interviewees creates an emotional connection to the content that they cannot get in the classroom and really motivates them to work hard, to write their stories, and to present their work to their interviewees.
Julia Adams is a selfless woman who accomplished a lot in her lifetime. During her senior year, she befriended Josephine Boyd,
the only African American student in the newly integrated school.
She went over to Josephine Boyd and asked her to sit with her and her friends at lunch. This was an act of kindness that would change both of their lives forever.
Taking a courageous stand has had an impact on Julia's life. One day, a woman with a baseball bat was looking for her at school because she felt Julia shouldn't be helping Josephine.
Years later, Greensboro High School honored Josephine for being the first Black student to integrate the school, and at the ceremony, Julia Adams gave a speech. Even today, Julia Adams can be found helping others.
We want to set every student up for success. So we
stop that there, but that idea of the exhibition, when the work that you've done is presented and shared with the community, is crucial part of both motivating kids to do their best work and of really engaging their community and blessing and honoring them as well. Can I show you one more? This is a kindergarten, just to see what it looks like. And they were studying birds. And here's some excerpts from their celebration.
In kindergarten, we've been learning about birds, and we just recently finished our celebration of learning with our exhibition night. Our celebration is a great opportunity for families to really get an idea of what their kids can do.
It helps it stay onto the tree. The water drains out, but the food still goes in.
Wow. To begin our celebration, we took on the role of performer and we sang songs for our friends and family and members of the community. Then we moved into the role of scientists, where we presented our research and scientific drawings to our audience.
It eats fish, crayfish, insects.
Every student shared their work using a presentation board.
That's how I know.
The role of the boards for the students became a way for them to be cued for their presentation, to show some of their work, and to have an up-close and personal interactive experience with their audience.
Now who wants to guess what kind of feed it has?
Well, can I guess what kind of feed it has? So if it eats fish, I bet it's got web feet.
No, you're not right. It has lobes.
And then we moved into the role of artist, where we got to have a gallery walk of our work.
Oh, look at the giraffes. Oh, you guys are amazing.
Getting kids ready for a night like this happens all year long. Kindergartners researched an individual bird, and they researched that bird with a 6th grade buddy.
Female with the red dot in the head.
They collected information together specifically on one bird. Over the course of the year, we use bird journals. We invite domesticated birds into our classroom that we can handle. We incubate eggs in an incubator. We hatch the chicks. We go into the field, visiting places that are working directly with birds. The kids went through 4 to 5 drafts of their bird, and we develop a really simple rubric to help them with their scientific drawing. Their research and artwork are all going to be put together on a note card, and then those are sold to the community, and the money that's collected from those note cards are put towards Idaho rehabilitation and conservation efforts. As we get closer to the evening, we begin to think about specifics, about what does a presenter and a performer look like? What are the skills that are needed for that? We practice presenting to each other, to small groups, to the whole class, and then sometimes to the other class, kids that we don't know very well.
Its wingspan is 8 inches. I haven't been learning a lot about how much it weighs, but Angela, can you check that?
I absolutely can. 5 to 10.
5 to 10 eggs.
Celebrations are an opportunity for us to invite the people that we've worked with all year, the experts we've worked with, the people that have come into the classroom, and the people we've been out to see.
What does she do? She's on the nest with eggs. I got involved with Answer
because we help start a program called Bird by Bird, where we provide bird watching equipment and act as citizen scientists. So take real data and be a part of this global database that tracks birds. We came back to the expedition tonight to support the 34 kids I've been working with all year. For me to walk around and see all this beautiful watercolor artwork and to see all the kids present their birds, and as real scientists, they did a phenomenal job.
If it builds its nest on the shore, it builds a ramp up to it with sticks, so it just walks out of the water and goes to its home.
Sounds like a very smart bird.
It very is.
It's really fun to watch those kids that wouldn't even raise their hand at the beginning of the year. Now they're in front of two families that they don't even know, and they're sharing everything in a very proud way.
Length is 24 centimeters. It's song. I can probably imitate it for you.
Okay.
It's like
This evening of celebration really proves and shows that they can do it and how hard they've worked and all the things that they've learned. I think that's what that celebration does for them, is it really just like solidifies that they can do it and that they can do anything.
The fact that they stand up and present in a manner that I did in college for the first time, it's really amazing. It makes a parent really proud.
I could tell they felt good and they felt proud and they felt like they knew their stuff. I mean, they were the experts.
All right, I hope it's okay. I'm sorry I'm showing you video, but I think for me, just seeing the real what it looks like is much more powerful than talking about it. So this idea of the exhibition, of the celebration, of the presentation of their learning is a vital way to involve the community.
That looked lovely, and I think I'm sure it did wonders for their confidence. I saw all the skills that they've learned was very visible, right? It was from writing to the drawing and the drafts. I think the skills were also visible. It wasn't just the end product. So the process was also celebrated. And I really loved that.
Terrific. Yeah.
So that brings me, I think, to the final question that we wanted to ask you. And this is something that's really important. What's the role of a parent in this whole journey? Because there's so much we've talked about what happens in the classroom, what's the role of a facilitator and all of this. But then what's the role of a parent or the family or the caregiver in this child's life?
Yeah. Great question. And there's no question that when the child feels that the parents and the teachers are on the same plane, that they will be impacted. It's very bad when, kid goes home and says bad things about school and the parent supports them, or the other way where kids come in and complain about something at home and the teacher supports them. I always would make a pact with my parents at the beginning of the year, and I say, I promise you, if your kid ever comes home and tells you some story that sounds horrible, I'll ask you just to hold back your judgment, like in any way you can support me. And then you sure enough call me about it afterwards and we'll talk. But before the child, we want to present a united front. And I will do the same to you, because kids come in and say all kinds of things about home. And I will always, my first reaction will be to support somehow. And then I may talk to you later, but let's before them, be on the same page. I would always, in the summer, before I was doing a big project, invite parents in to talk to them about it. So I knew who my kids were going to be in that year. I would have a meeting. Whoever could come would come. I would explain, we're going to be studying the bike path that they just built in our town. And here's the way I think I'm going to get to simple machines, and how I'm going to get to rocks and minerals, and how I'm going to get to social studies. So I kind of lay out my plan a little bit for them. And and both because I want their buy-in. Like if they said, I don't like this, I don't want my kid in this class, then we have to talk about that, or maybe there's even a different class, or maybe I'll adapt what I'm doing if there's something specific. But I like to involve the parents in sharing, and then they'll have great ideas and great resources. So many times, this one knows this person who's an expert in that, and this one has a connection to the printer, so we can get our stuff printed at cost. Or that's one important way. That's more than just like doing a bake sale or something. Going on field work with kids. So we do a lot of field work. By the way, we one of the things I forbid schools to use the term field trips. I don't know what you say in India, but when a kid hears field trip, it's rah rah rah. We're going out to have fun, but it just the word just field work is different. That's kind of what the expert does. The scientist goes into the field, and it's not anything different than what you're learning. It's just learning, but we're learning outside instead of learning in the classroom. So we always called it field work, but there's lots of opportunities for parents to be part of that if their schedule allows them. I mean, many are working and can't get away to do that, but it's another opportunity. I think one really big one that I wish I had done with my family, but I didn't. So one of the things that I had the privilege of working with people at the Heritage School in Gurgaon, and one of the things we did was develop what they called their Dharma, which were, again, just the ideas and the principles that were most valuable to them in that community. Kids did projects around these. They made cards to represent each one and what they meant. They came up with symbols, with definitions, and what's powerful is, and I don't know that they did this at Heritage, but in schools I work with here, often these will be shared with parents, and parents will take the same ones and practice them together and reflect on them together and share stories about them together at home. So, and put up the poster. So this idea that, so courage, say, is something that one of the words, it's not one of these, but respect. Let's take respect. So at home, I mean, we would have a time at dinner. If we eat together, how did we do with respect today? Anybody see any example where you were respected, or anybody have an example of when you respected someone or disrespected? Does anybody want to apologize to their sister or brother for a disrespect? So beginning to live those values at home, and not just the kids, but the adults too. And it's not like we're all perfect and the kids all have to learn. We're all striving to become better at these things. So whatever the virtues are, and if your school has one, then whatever those are, see if you can practice those together at home, and it will be very powerful then for kids to really begin to form them in ways that are just healthy and true. If your school doesn't have one, then it might be something to lobby for, like what are the virtues, the values, the Dharma that we care about most, in terms of, they're going to learn all this stuff, but as people, as human beings, what do we want most for them? What are the character qualities? And if the school develops those, then practice those again at home.
So this is brilliant, and I think what you mentioned about the heritage dharma and the virtues and the values, at Tapas we call them astitva. Astitva is similar to raison d'etre, the reason to be, right? And these are the virtues that we practice. And so the astitva values are something that we share with the parents. So I'm so glad that we are able to follow some of the things that you've shown. And I'm really excited that Tapas is on the path of what you have presented today. There's so much that we are already doing, but I also am very mindful that there is so much more that Tapas can do. And this has been a wonderful learning experience for me.
Well, thank you, Preeti. Thank you.
So coming back to summing all of this up, I'm going to ask you one last thing: that what are your parting thoughts? What do you want our viewers to leave this session with?
Well, I don't know how many people are viewing, and each one will take something different from what they saw, I hope. I guess for me, sometimes what is most limiting in myself for doing something that's new or innovative or creative is just a lack of imagination. And I hope that, and so I'm like, one of the things I've done, I'm a collector of student work. So a lot of the slides that I showed you about the kids' work comes from hundreds and hundreds of projects that I've been collecting over 15, 20 years. So I have suitcases. One of my favorite things to do is to go to schools and bring hundreds of products like what I showed you and just let teachers look at them and talk about them. And what do we have to do to have kids do this kind of work? Because the work is compelling, and there aren't many people who would look at that and say, "Oh, I don't want my kids to do that. I'd rather have them doing worksheets and textbooks and get good scores on their tests." I don't think that's the case. So back to your question, I hope that your imagination has been expanded, that you have seen models that kind of demonstrate that it is possible. And it will be really hard. I mean, as many schools start this journey and continue with it, as many as that, more, I think, fall away. They get excited at the beginning. They think, oh, yeah, that's really great. And then jump into it and find it's just very difficult. And it's difficult because we don't have enough time. And then they blame, well, it's not blame, but like we found in expeditionary learning, when we at first started, we thought if we just design these amazing projects, then kids would be engaged and they'd learn everything and it would solve everything. And teachers thought the same. But as soon as they sat down to really try to plan it with the complexity and standard based and skills and content and everything that it takes, it was like, when are we supposed to do this? Is that like, are we supposed to do this after school? And you want us to collaborate furthermore? Is that on weekends? When? Because it does take a lot of work. So one of the first things we had to do was build into the schedule real time, not just little half hours here and there, but chunks of time for teachers to plan together. We need to have summer opportunities for teachers to come together and have, extended time to plan. So it will be difficult, and your passion and your belief that like this does matter, it's so important that this project gets done. That will also attract the resources you'll need. Teachers will say, well, I don't have enough money. We can't do that. And I just say, well, no, you just don't have enough passion for it. And you don't think it's important enough. Because if you did, the money would find you. The resources you need will find you. You will get your kids to write letters to the post or wherever it is and ask and explain what they're doing and why they need your help. Okay. Sorry. So that's so I hope your imagination has been expanded, that you can see something about what is possible, and that I can't help you with your will to persevere and the structures you'll need to build to make it happen. But I hope you'll be empowered to seek solutions for the obstacles that will come.
Absolutely. And I think definitely, at least my imagination has been expanded, and that connects me back to your first slide. So from the impossible to the possible, and that's the kind of roadmap that you helped us with. So thank you so much, Mr. Levy. I think this has been a fantastic learning opportunity, and I'm very, very grateful that you took the time and you helped us learn so much. So,
thank you. Well, thank you, Preeti, and thank you for your perseverance in working with me to make this happen. I really appreciate that. And blessings to all of you as you carry on whatever you've heard and bring it to your students and your families.
just thoughts at the end that Mr. Levy will share some resources with links of where we can learn more about this, and this will be emailed back to all the viewers who have registered to attend this session. So we are very thankful that he will take time and he will share these learnings with us as well. So thank you, Mr. Levy, for that.
Thank you, Preeti. Bye-bye.